So welcome everyone to the session on the Eightfold Path and right view, or Samadhi. So we'll be just talking about right view today. We'll cover the other seven aspects of the Eightfold Path in other sessions. And I thought I'd do a whole one on right view or right wise understanding, however we want to frame it, because it's so foundational and it kind of sets the direction for the entire unfolding of the Eightfold practices or Eightfold Path, because our understanding affects how we engage with the other practices. It really, in so many ways, starts with and ends with our understanding. So I want to talk about three things: how the right view is different from knowledge as we usually think of it. When we hear the word view, we usually think of knowledge. So how it's different than how we usually think of it. I want to talk about it in terms of the way that the Buddha spoke about it, in terms of right view for worldly ease, and right view or liberatory right view, like right view for freedom. Because the Buddha did speak about right view in both of those ways, which is quite interesting in and of itself. It's not something that's often done in the teachings, where there's a relative perspective on the teaching and an ultimate perspective on the teaching. And then thirdly, I want to look at how seeing the selfless nature of experience, or the illusion of the separate self, or the misperception of a separate self, how that is so key and foundational to wise view. So how is it different than regular knowledge? We've talked about this in these sessions, and the difference between an insight or realization and sort of something you might read or glean from a book, or from analyzing data and coming to some conclusion that way through logic or reason. I mean, these all can play a role in coming to wise view or right view, but it's not what, in their essence, what they are. So you could think of kind of regular knowledge as a surface understanding about events and elements that allow us to control conditions, to meet, you could say at a personal level, to meet desires. So it's that kind of knowledge that we use to, and there's practical knowledge as well that we use to navigate the world as individuals. So it's not in any way saying that that's not important. It's just saying that this is different. We're looking here at really deep understandings that allow us to see who we truly are, to see what, at our essence, who we are, and really to see what we aren't. It's kind of through knowing what we aren't that we can see that which we are. I kind of pointed to that in the guided meditation, looking for the self in thoughts. Can you find a self there in thoughts? Is that substantial enough? I mean, if it was you could start to look and say, okay, well, then I should be able to really control these thoughts. For one, it should be my essence. Is that my essence when I look at thoughts? You start to see, well, it's just phenomenon arising and passing. They're just transitory, contingent phenomenon. And you can really start to see that and start to say, okay, well, so that's not a self. And okay, what about that? And you can kind of just go through step by step. And then you can also look at these in meditation and daily life practice. And I'll talk more about that, but that's what I'm pointing to when I talk about this right view understanding. So we're looking deeply at life, at nature, the way the world really is for us, to really kind of understand how reality works. You can see how that's quite different than, well, you could say it's maybe quantum physics is looking at that aspect of life and in different ways. But for the most part, practical knowledge is a different animal. One thing we begin to understand is that our view of the world is limited by the way humans are, by the way we see the world, by the way our mind and sense organs experience the world. So that limits, that's a very limiting aspect of what we can grasp or through these limited sense organs. I look at my dog. So he sees the world, experiences the world through his limited sense organs. So his sense of smell, of course, is quite a bit more powerful than a human sense of smell. So he's really experiencing the world as smells. His eyesight is limited. He's not seeing the red-green spectrum. So his sight that's being brought into the brain is different. It's limited by the eyesight sense organ of seeing. So you kind of look at all, the experience of the world of the dog is the way that the dog views it based on this limited abilities that they have. It's the same for humans. We're limited in what we can see by our mind and sense organs. So it's kind of like, you could say it's like looking at snow through orange glasses. You're never going to see white snow. So you're limited by those orange glasses to seeing the reality of white snow. Well, we're limited by all our sense organs actually seeing reality for what it is. So there needs to be there's another way then to kind of grok, I guess that's a word we can use, to grok the nature of reality that goes beyond what the mind can grasp through the sense organs. So the mind can never see truth through thought and sense organs. So if we're looking for truth in that way, it just can't be found. It's the limited trying to see the unlimited, the finite, limited mind trying to see the infinite, unlimited reality of being. So we investigate. So we look at our direct experience moment by moment, and we investigate what's not um, a self. We can start to sort of pick away at that, and we just through this kind of meditative inquiry and seeing things as they really are, we start to touch into the reality of the way things are. You get glimpses, in a sense, of when I say the way things are, well, you could say the nature aspect of all experience, that it's just nature unfolding. You start to see that nature aspect of everything. I came across another definition of mindfulness in a Dharma talk by Carol Wilson. And she said that I think she didn't know where she'd heard it, but so she didn't attribute it. She thought it might have been Sayadaw Tanjaniya, but she wasn't quite sure. But she said it's her favorite definition of mindfulness at the moment. And it kind of struck me too as informative. The definition is experiencing the mind body directly, moment to moment, with right understanding. So experiencing mind body directly, moment by moment, with right understanding. So it's really putting this notion of right understanding front and center. So we look at our experience as it's as arising moment by moment. We look at our habitual reactions. We see how we have these habitual reactions to internal and external events, and how this equals suffering. We start to see suffering. And with right view, these conditioned reactions just don't make sense. And we see this in kind of an aha way. I think that the way the Buddha started with suffering, and then how we create suffering, how we cause suffering, and then how the abandonment of clinging leads to the end of suffering. He's really pointing out, asking us to look at direct experience, to see the selfless nature of what's arising. And how when we insert a self in there, it craves and clings, grasps and pushes away, trying to find happiness. So you could say that it's kind of an aha or insight as you kind of, as right view builds, these kind of ahas occur. It's like, if you have to know those little cubes that the children's puzzle game, it's a cube shaped and it's got, moon shapes and circles and squares, and they have to fit them in the holes. So the circle has to fit in the little circle hole. Have you ever seen those little it's a children's toy that, and if you watch a child when they first sort of play with this, they keep trying to put this, the circle in the square hole, and they're just trying to stuff things in, maybe even whack it a little and try and push it in. And there can be some confusion and frustration. And then if you pick it up and then just grab a circle and plop it in, well, then you can see, you can actually see some anger perhaps, and more frustration as they try to put the shapes in their proper space on the block. But at some point they get it. It's like, aha, they get it. And all those emotions vanish. There's no more struggle. It's just gone. There's just no more struggle. And all the emotions that they had around it are gone. And I don't know if that metaphor is helpful in seeing right view. Excuse me. Okay. So with right view, we recognize all the lenses or filters, conditioning, limited human capabilities that shape our perception of the world. We recognize this, and that allows us to go below it or behind it or somewhere else. I mean, in Zen, they sort of step backwards, and different traditions, they talk about it in different ways, but it's really, going beyond those lenses and filters and limited human capacities that shape our perception, and directly touching in to nature, the way it's arising and falling. So that's how it's different from regular knowledge. Now I want to talk about called worldly right view and liberatory right view. So the Buddha talked about these two types of right view. He called the translations, it's usually mundane right view and supramundane right view. I've just rephrased mundane as worldly, and supramundane as kind of liberatory. That's which, leading to freedom. So understanding that leads to kind of worldly happiness is an ease, and the other is a right view that leads to liberation. So he talked about um, sort of understandings that can lead to this kind of worldly happiness. So there might not be a realization of true nature, but there's some understanding of what brings happiness, even through desire, well, with desire and craving still present. So things like acquiring merit. So in Buddhist countries, if you give to the practitioners, or the monks and the nuns, it's called acquiring merit. So you get some merit, which may bring a better rebirth, or better results in your life. So it's sort of these activities that may bring better outcomes in your life, as opposed to the abandonment of craving. So it's related, I guess you could say, to the law of karma, that your actions have consequences. It's a cause and effect to the actions that you take in the world. And the law of karma is, as the Buddha said, the only things that truly belong to us are our actions and their results. So with this kind of understanding of the law of karma, people may pay more attention to their actions in the world, or where they're sort of heading in terms of their actions in the world. So there's a kind of a sense of responsibility for what one does, knowing that it has consequences in the moment and for the future. And the Buddha often started with this kind of discourse, talking about the importance of the law of karma, and the importance of that we're the heir of our actions. And I would then talk about generosity and the importance of practicing generosity, how this brings positive results for oneself and for the world. The Dalai Lama always likes to say that generosity is the most selfish thing we can do. I've heard him pretty well every public talk he gives. That somehow comes into the talk. The Buddha often said that if we knew the fruits of giving, we wouldn't let a single meal pass without sharing it. So again, the importance of generosity. For me, a personal practice is to sort of not let the impulse to be generous pass. It's at one point in my life, I noticed that, there would be an impulse to be generous in some way, and then I would kind of second guess it and say, well, maybe I shouldn't do that, or well, maybe that's not appropriate, or and I start to kind of overthink it, and then of course the moment would pass, the opportunity could pass. So I sort of, if the impulse arises to be generous, my sort of intention is to not second guess it, but rather just to act on it. So if the impulse arises to give something to somebody, I'll just give it to them. I won't think about, I wonder what my wife will say if I give that away. I wonder, and so on and so forth. You could see how the second guessing could talk you out of it rather quickly. So the practice of generosity falls under this worldly right view. The Buddha listed kind of 10 unwholesome actions. I don't know if you've come across that lead to worldly unhappiness or worldly suffering. Killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, speaking harshly, backbiting, useless speech, covetousness, ill will, and wrong view. So the opposite, of course, are the wholesome states. I like the fact that useless speech is in there. That's an interesting one, like gossip. But anyway, that's a whole other talk. Try to practice that one for just a day. No useless speech. It's on the list of 10 unwholesome actions. So after all that, after having said all that, the Buddha emphasizes that we should not settle for wholesome states of mind. So these are all the wholesome states of mind. This is the law of karma. It's a part of right view, but we should not settle for merely wholesome states of mind. In other words, the whole point of his practice was, and his teachings, was freedom. So then that's where the second aspect of right view comes in, the liberatory right view. So that's understanding things as they really are, understanding the Four Noble Truths, understanding impermanence and not self. That's the liberatory, the super mundane right view. And that's mostly what we talk about here. I mean, I try to weave in the wholesome and skillful aspects of the practice, but at least lately we've been speaking more and more about the awakening aspects of this practice. A quote from the Buddha, and what is right view? Knowledge with regard to stress, knowledge with regards to the origination of stress or dukkha, suffering, knowledge with regard to the cessation of stress or suffering, and knowledge with regard to the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. This is called right view. So he very much tied it into the Four Noble Truths themselves, knowing right view. I see seeing not self as really the foundation of this. In fact, I see seeing not self as the foundation of seeing the third noble truth. Because it's only a self that clings. In fact, with self-view, clinging is mandatory. With self-view, struggle is the natural consequence. A sense of inadequacy is a natural consequence, because the self is is incomplete by its very nature. Seeking is a natural consequence of self-view, because a self is always going to seek happiness, and it's not finding it in objects. So it starts to seek happiness, even in spiritual practices. So noticing this is the key to the liberatory or freedom oriented right view, seeing the truth. And seeing the truth is just as much about is really seeing the illusory nature of non-truth. We see the view of a separate independent self as not truth. So you see how you can come at this? You're seeing non-truth, and through that what's left is truth. So you see that the self is not thoughts. The self isn't simply perceptions. You can't find a self in body sensations. You can't find a self in feelings and emotions. You can't find a self in the rising of pleasant, unpleasant, neutrals. And you can't find a self in consciousness. That's the way the Buddha used the word consciousness. So you look for the self in those places, and you find the non-truth of those being a self. And what's left is what's left? Well, there's something that's aware of all this happening. There's something. There's a stillness. There's a void within which all this arises and passes away. And that's when you can then, the truth can then, you have a portal then to the truth. Sort of once you've seen the illusory nature of the other aspects of your experience. I hope you see this, because it's, I hope I'm getting it across. I mean, in my, I took the looking for the self very seriously. So I really looked to see if I could find a self in thought. And I looked and I looked and I looked, and you know, I actually got kind of tired of looking. And then at one point I was doing a walking meditation, and it just struck me that thoughts are just arising, unannounced, uninvited. They're just arising, and so then I just started just watching how thoughts would just bubble up, and then I stopped sort of walking a path. I thought, I'm just going to walk until the thought bubbles up to stop, or to start, or to stop and turn. So then I was just walking, and of course a thought would bubble up to stop. I'd go, wow, that's amazing. It just like, there's just thoughts of nature. It's just nature arising. And so that's really when it kind of hit me in a deep sense that, you know, I can't find a self in thought. And then you just kind of pick away at, well, what about perceptions? I have all these perceptions that color how I view the world. Start to just look again and again and again at that. Is that a self? But wait a minute, they're always changing. So it really started to hit me when I started to see the impermanent nature of all these perceptions that I had. My music taste would change. My perception of this and that would shift and change. You can kind of just go through and see the illusory nature of those as in terms of it being uh, an essence, an independent, abiding essence. So then once those kind of five are gone, what are you left with? Kind of a void. You're left with this, you've kind of investigated to the point where you know what the self isn't. So you're just kind of left with this the stillness, the silence, the absence of any definition, the just the space. Or so the with the liberatory right view, we can have a skillful engagement in the world because we're engaging with the world as it truly is, as opposed to how we might um, conceive of it with our minds. And we realize that with non-interference with nature arising, that true happiness arises, is present. So there's kind of this non-resistance to nature unfolding, which with as one lives that more and more, you see how that's a more skillful engagement with the world, not just a relief of this kind of internal stress and tension, but also a more skillful engagement with other people and with what's unfolding in the world. So it's I invite you to really engage with these. Right view invites us to really engage with the teachings and to really investigate and see for ourselves. So it's it's the if we're going to use that mountain metaphor again, it's actually uh, navigating up the mountain, not just reading the trail map. It's really engaging with the teachings and not just reading the trail map of the mountain trail map. Mm. So, right view is, I think it's, although we say, the eight factors are the eightfold elements are, all interlinked, and you know, they're unfolding simultaneously in many ways. Right view is kind of is the first, I think, for a reason, um, in that it really does point the direction for the practice, for the investigation. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it there and open it up for any questions. Maybe explore this through more of a dialogue. There's so many things I could sort of tangents I could go off on, but I'll open it up to questions that see what's on your mind. Well, perhaps I'll ask you. Oh, go ahead, Anita.
I'm struggling a little bit with it. Sort of, I'm kind of stuck on the first one, the worldly right view is not even getting to the next one, but it seems simple, yet I don't think it's simple. And that's why I think I'm stuck, because it sounds like it's as simple as just seeing things as they really are, rather than the delusion of the self, and seeing it through, I guess, being open and removing the filters, or just being open to what arises. Is, but I don't know, is that sort of what you're getting at, or is it more or less than that? I think I'm struggling. Thanks.
Yeah, it's simple to say, seeing things as they really are. But I won't use the word difficult. Well, I guess you could use the word difficult. It's difficult in the sense that our minds can't grasp it, and that's the direction that we tend to go. We tend to want to figure it out with our minds, and the mind just cannot. The mind cannot figure it out. Just like Rocky will never see green and red, right? And just like I'll never smell, you know, a friend coming a mile away, right? I just never will. It's so it's kind of like we're trying to see something that where we don't have, like, we don't, the mind isn't capable of seeing. So but that's how we want to come at it, right? We want to come at it through the mind and through thinking, because that's how we engage with um, the world that we interact with, that we navigate. And so this is an investigation that's coming at it completely different. And that's why, we talk about the importance of don't know mind, beginner's mind. It's, kind of, it is not kind of, it is putting aside what the mind might think the truth is, and just being with our direct experience moment by moment, and seeing what's revealed in that. I mean, that's one way to come at it. Another way is to use the mind as an ally, in a sense, because it can do some kind of investigative work. So testing out, okay, is there really a self in thought? And it's just in investigating that. So and then that can get you quite a ways. I mean, you combine those two things as kind of, using the mind as an ally in investigating, and you combine that with, so that's more the contemplative aspects, which we've talked a lot about in these for the last year, going through the Lojong trainings, which are all slogans that you kind of contemplate. And with the, being present with your direct experience moment by moment. And when you combine those two things, you kind of get beyond, you do get beyond thought, beyond figuring it out with the thinking mind, and start to see nature just unfolding. And that's kind of what dawns on us, is that I'm not in control of any of this. you can start to see that. I mean, the mind, and you'll get arguments from the mind all along the way, right? Oh, wait a minute, I can control this or I can control that. So, well, investigate it. So although the mind can't figure it out, I don't want you to think that, don't know mind means you never use your mind. Don't know mind is one way to approach this. It's, it's being open to what is, as opposed to what the mind thinks it is. But you can also use the mind to, as a powerful tool, really, to to look at aspects of reality. So I don't want to completely discount the usefulness of that, but yeah, it's takes persistence. I would say it takes trust, even faith, not faith in the sense of blind faith, like not, so I'm not asking you to adopt a belief, but there, I found it took some faith for me to persevere in the practice. There's an aspect of faith that came into it, and trust, to just continue to look deeply over and over and over and over again. So yeah, to answer your question, you're right. It's simple, a lot simpler to say than it is to see. And I guess that's why the Buddha sat there for some time, contemplating whether or not he would even try to teach this stuff. Right? He really thought it might be too subtle, too because and also what he went through. I mean, he put himself through a lot of different paths, you might say. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's definitely, it's easy, it's easier to say than it is to do, and it can also be stressful. I know it's billed as stress reduction, but stress reduction can be seeing the truth of how we create suffering can bring some stress, and also seeing allowing things to just to be and to come forth can also be stressful if we've stuffed down, or some things in our life, or we don't face either history or the way we are now. You start to really see, oh wow, that's a personality trait. You really start to see these personality traits that, I mean, you didn't choose them or construct them, but they're there, right? And that can be stressful. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully I'm not presenting this as easy street, but there's also so much joy in the moments of seeing and touching, because it's touching into love and compassion as well, right? That's our true nature. I mean, that's a path that some people just go down, is just continually touching in to love and compassion, and that being the portal to seeing our your true nature. We've explored that portal as well. The Four Noble Truths kind of is another portal, which I think it's really a not self-teaching, but he's come at it through how suffering is created by believing in a self. because it's a self that struggles, that clings. Yeah.
I just want to add one more thing. So it sounds to me it almost is less stressful in the sense that it takes the burden off us of trying to figure everything out. So the thoughts and the mind is sort of, we park that, or we that's not the way forward. That's not the way to right view. It's sensing into our true nature, or to our intuition, or to what we know, and calming them. Like, just, it's such a struggle to try and figure every life out. Whereas what I think I'm hearing is that, in fact, we want to transcend that, and we have within us this whatever it is, this ability to see. So it's right view isn't right thinking. It's right. You say right view for a reason. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right view is another word is right understanding. So all the direct path teachings, like Dogen and Tibetan teachings, Advaita Vedanta and the Vedic teachings, all start with right view. And the idea isn't that you adopt it as a belief. The idea is you glimpse into right view and you dwell in that. That's your dwelling. That's where you dwell. And that's what your meditations become. So they all start with that. The direct path teachings start with glimpsing into right view, dwelling in that place. And then, so I've been pointing to that for some time now, as a way to come at this and to have awakenings and have insights. So yeah, so it's right understanding, and with right you understand, then you can also then feel into how wrong view is triggered, how self view is reinforced or triggered. Is triggered the right word? Or re-engaged. So you can really feel into that. And then you can feel into how then acting in the world from that place of right view, what that feels like, as opposed to an egoic self acting in the world. That's really, what as the Eightfold Path sort of unfolds, that's, he gets into, the Buddha gets into, how we act in the world, right action, right speech, and right livelihood. But yeah, I really do think starting with right view as a foundation is crucial in this practice. And the insight meditation world would be inclined more towards a kind of a purification path, where we deal with all our incompletions and and really see deeply into ourselves, so and kind of purify the fetters and deal with the hindrances and the fetters. And so it's got that very more gradual kind of purification, whereas I'm kind of coming at it from, well, just glimpse the truth of your true nature, and you won't want to be selfish, greedy. It just doesn't make any sense, and it kind of naturally falls away. because it doesn't make any sense. The Eightfold Path is really kind of saying that. Now here's, you have right view, none of the, actions that harm others. When you're all one body, how does that make any sense? You're one consciousness. It'd be like, cutting your own arm, hurting yourself because you're, yeah.
Stephen,